Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Abe Greenwald is the executive editor of Commentary Magazine, one of the participants in the Daily in My Ear commentary podcast. He very rarely missed it. And now he's doing a commentary newsletter, which I have not yet subscribed to, but I will. Abe Greenwald, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Now, Abe, I want to explain to people the commentary podcast is kind of an orchestra. John Podhoretz conducts it. I think you're the cellist. I'm not going to say what the other instruments are, but occasionally you need a trumpet, meaning you got to go find a young lawyer, not me, I'm not auditioning, to occasionally bring some law in there. Because when you were talking about the lawyers at the DOJ today or yesterday, I thought to myself, they could really use a lawyer to, like Philip Howard or someone like that. Have you ever thought about adding a lawyer to the ensemble?
Well, we often have, as a guest, but not as a regular member, Adam White, who's a terrific,
very good
constitutional scholar and scholar of the Supreme Court. And he immediately takes the conversations to places having to do with jurisprudence that are well beyond my head, but certainly clarifying.
Well, when you were talking about the DOJ lawyers who've been fired, Donald Trump has done a lot to federal civilian employees in the last 10 days. They got to go back to work. They got an offer to retire early. The inspectors generals were fired, and the DOJ 12 attorneys were fired. I'm going to focus on the last one. I used to run OPM under Ronald Reagan 30 plus years ago, and I was its general counsel before I ran it. So my immediate reaction is no one should talk about federal personnel because it's so damn complex nobody knows. But I know a little about DOJ because I was there as well. And they're not like regular civil servants. They're lawyers. You got more flexibility, but I honestly don't know if you can fire them. My question to you is, should they have ever accepted the job for Jack Smith in the first place? Because you can't make a DOJ lawyer become a special counsel, a deputy special counsel, or an assistant special counsel. You can't make them do it. Should they have accepted that gig?
Well, I mean, I suppose they should have gone with their individual consciences on that question. Would I have accepted that gig? No. Jack Smith was clearly eager to use whatever means were at hand to destroy Trump. And at least one case that he's brought up has been proven really flimsy. So, no, and obviously, you know, like so many of Trump's enemies since 2015, he has gone from hero to nobody.
And that's where I want to pick up. On today's podcast, you said we need a limiting principle, and I believe you were quoting Noah Rothman, who's a frequent guest on the program as well, that what's the limiting principle on what Trump is doing to the federal civil service, and how do we de-escalate, or maybe are we escalating too fast? Here's my question. Do you think Donald Trump has to escalate in order to de-escalate after the last 4 years?
I think he's doing it tactically more than strategically. This is not what I don't think we're going to see for 4 years. I think the idea is to overwhelm his political enemies at the moment, throw so much at them that they can't even begin to push back on it. Although I have to say they have. But I think that's the idea. And to excite his base. The question of, can you break things in order to fix them? Or can you sow chaos in order to fix rotten institutions? That's where the line gets very blurry. You see today that Trump walked back his executive order on funding all sorts of domestic programs. I think that's a snag he hit here this first time around. I think we're starting to maybe get into the little too soon, too much too soon area, even though I understand the general approach and its efficacy.
You know, the DEI order was so very well drafted. I read the whole thing. I teach con law, and I said, this is a really nice piece of work. I think the order on discretionary spending actually lacked the word discretionary. And so it became a nightmare for them. So they got to go slow in order to go right. But I do think you needed to flood the zone in order to overwhelm initial opponents. And especially, and this is what I want to get to you about, the media is just trapped in narratives that they can't get out of, including For example, we rarely saw a story about Judge Eileen Cannon, who was handling the Florida case against Trump, that did not mention she was a Trump appointee and was a relatively inexperienced federal judge. Doesn't matter the Constitution. You're a federal judge. You're in Article 3. Well, the judge who enjoined the OMB order that has now been withdrawn is a 2023 appointment by Joe Biden that was approved 51-50 with Kamala Harris casting the vote. Have you seen that anywhere,
No.
Abe Greenwald?
No, I've not.
What's that tell you?
Oh, I'm with you. The media have learned nothing.
Nothing.
And they sound as if Kamala's still running, and there's a chance for Joy to come back and to defeat Trump. They haven't woken up after Election Day.
I like your Joy conversation, by the way. I especially want to know, before I forget, before we run out of time, why did you guys decide to crash the opening weekend of Captain America: Brave New World? I think you've crushed their opening weekend. Absolutely destroyed it. I'm not going.
Well, that was something. John is a connoisseur of pop culture and of movies, and this was a story that had come to his attention, not to mine. I think it was Continetti said on the show, Matt Continetti was surprised that John was surprised that the star who was portraying Captain America said that Captain America shouldn't represent America because he's representing truth and justice and all sorts of things that, by implication, America doesn't stand for. I recalled while we were having this conversation that the Superman comics in 2021 or so had pulled "And the American Way" from the Superman line of his fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. So I figured this is just where they are. But it's another example of the media of sorts, the entertainment industry, really not having gotten the memo. It's not 2020, it's not the George Floyd summer, and the majority of the country knows it.
I've got a buddy, John Schroeder. He writes for my blog occasionally, and he's a comic book aficionado and collector, and it's one of his hobbies. And he can give you line and verse of how woke comic went. Do you think we've turned a corner on woke, Abe Greenwald?
I can't speak to the world of comics. I think we turned a corner on woke a few years ago, to be honest. I think the high water mark probably was around 21, 22. And then for a number of reasons, including the crime spike after the withholding of funds from police, the whistleblower reports and studies that came out about transgender medical care for kids, and I think a number of things woke up a larger number of people, and we're still seeing it. Well, we're not out of the woke woods, but I could see the clearing.
Stand by for a minute, Abe. I'm back with Abe Greenwald, the executive editor of Commentary. Abe, I want to know what you do for your newsletter. I get news items every day. I'm down to the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. I've canceled every other newspaper. I get the free press, and I pay for news items because I got to know what's going on in the world. Now you have a new newsletter. What are you looking for in the Commentary newsletter? What do you put in there?
Well, what mine is not, it doesn't have the aggregator quality of a lot of others. I write something like a column every day for it. Sometimes I will use material from Commentary's archives because we've been in existence for nearly 80 years, and there's very often some brilliant and shockingly relative pieces in there that can shed light on what's going on now. But really, I'm trying to flesh out my thoughts on that day politically, whether what's happening here, what's happening abroad, or a general trend in the country. And I write my piece, and then below it you have all the links. You have the links to the most recent blog post. You have the links to the most recent podcast, and links to the month's issue, the articles in the current issue.
So, Abe, last question. We're almost completely in sync on matters of national security. And I say we, that means me and your ensemble. What I want to know, though, is are you surprised by the success of the Commentary podcast? Because it's my first listen every day. I assume other people made it their first listen because it's smart. Are you surprised by that?
I think I'm a little surprised by the size of the success. I mean, I thought we were good and I like it. But I think it comes down to our being quite unique. We have a unique chemistry between us. We are ideological in the sense that we are ideas based, but we are not predictably partisan. I mean, we're a little predictably partisan, but the idea is not politics, it is ideas. And there's also the window into matters Jewish and what's happening in Israel that you don't get other places. So there's a unique recipe, I think, that people respond to. And I think I know that I enjoy doing it, certainly during the pandemic when we started doing it so often. I think that's when it became really vital for those of us on the podcast, and the closeness of the group, even though it's changed over time. I think probably is conveyed to the listener, and we're all quite different. You know, we're all quite
the
different.
ages
Even though
are
we're
different.
on the same page.
The ages are different. The experiences are different. I just can't recommend it enough to people who like me. They will love Commentary Podcast and, of course, Commentary Magazine. Abe Greenwald, thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you again next month.
Thank you so much.